Hey everybody, welcome back to Terminus, the high on life of extreme metal podcasts. I am the death metal guy, aka Dark Space, the space-themed black metal band for people with very little interest in either black metal or space.
That is very true. And I am the black metal guy, aka if you really liked metal, you would listen to rap instead.
Okay. I'm guessing that's extremely inside baseball. I don't even know how to parse it, really. But
It's just like, bro, I'm so secure in liking metal that I don't even need to listen to metal. I'm so secure in liking metal that I go to the metal show, but I'm wearing my Wu-Tang Clan shirt.
Oh, are we doing the weird... the inversion of the 2000s, the like mid-2000s thing where you bashfully talk about listening to some non-metal band, and now this is like the pendulum swung version of that?
Yeah, I mean, basically, I think that happened a long time ago. It started on the punk scene, where it's like, wow, if you were really secure about liking punk, you would just like rap.
People go to metal shows all the time wearing stuff from other genres of music. I'll do that sometimes. It's not like nobody even pays attention. Nobody is thinking that much about your t-shirt.
I am, and I'm judging you.
That's fair. I only notice it if it's like something particularly like offbeat and cool. Like I've got an acquaintance who has a really cool Abigor shirt, and I always forget that he has it until he's at a show. I'm like, oh, that's a fucking cool Abigor shirt, man. You don't see a lot of those in the wild.
Nice. Yeah, that is a very old school shirt. Anyway, so the thing about Dark Space was also, I think, quite good.
I think I posted something on Facebook, which is like, I think I saw a lot of people saying that the new Dark Space wasn't very good. We're not going to cover it. Who fucking gives a shit? But I'm just wondering if it's just everybody catching up to the fact that Dark Space wasn't good, or if there is something substantially different about the new one. Because I never understood that fascination. Which makes sense, because I never understood the fascination with Paysage d'Hiver either.
Well, they've sort of shifted their focus from dark space to bright objects.
Oh, has there been some sort of thematic shift that I wasn't aware of?
No, I'm just saying. I'm trying to think.
Okay. It's a bit. Okay, I got
you. It's this next. We're dark space, but this next record is bright objects.
Yeah, I think Paysage d'Hiver was like the launching pad for a whole lot of like really boring Atmo Black that just never grabbed me.
We're so secure in our dark space that we can do songs about stars.
I mean, isn't that just liturgy then?
Man. Yeah, I mean, probably.
the philosophical logic behind it.
It's Anyway, do we have anything else we need to say up front?
Nah, I'll plug everything since I forgot to last time. Social media, me, Death Metal Guy, Facebook, @Terminus Podcast, you, Black Metal Guy, Instagram, @Terminus Extreme Metal. And for those particularly dedicated among us, the few, the proud, the Terminators, you can subscribe to us on Patreon, where $5 an up gets you access to the Terminus Black Circle, where we are, as always, saying, in furtive, delicate voices, Gorgoroth.
Gorgoroth.
This is a little one Gash, and you're listening to Terminus.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with our first record of the night, and this one is one eagerly awaited by a large chunk of our fan base, and one that we sort of had to cover just because it is what it is, and because talking about this particular style has become a fixture of the show, and maybe we'll get a little bit further into our feelings about it this time. This is, of course, the new record by Rostorchester, titled Der Zinnen sang vom Niedergang, released, I think, just like a week ago on BergStolz, with, I'm sure, 20 other pressings upcoming. So, Rostorchester is probably the, if not foundational, the sort of definitive archetype of what I have started to call friendly cat black metal, which is a reference that's basically meaningless but stuck. And friendly cat black metal is defined by a sort of European melodic style of black metal, sometimes but not always related to the Franco-Finnish style, with a very large, and in some cases we would argue dominant, influence from emo, various melodic punk styles, etc. We've covered a few things in this style on the show, some good, some bad, but Rostorchester, I would say, is the band that encapsulates that particular style most distinctly and has risen to becoming one of the most prominent members of that style.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about, like, basically you've used that label as in black metal that doesn't sound very mean, it sounds nice like a friendly cat.
Yeah.
To describe basically Rostorchester and also Eisenwinter. The label might be even more apt for Eisenwinter, but Rostorchester really brings together every guy in this scene, because it's Antimessiah from Total Vernichtung, and also Zwingherr Greif from Eisenwinter, and a bunch of other. Obviously, they both have other projects, but like, it's sort of a central node for the guys playing in this style of. I would say almost, I feel like the Finnish stuff, it's in there, but it takes a backseat to, like, exaggerated gestures from Absurd and stuff. Like,
yeah, at least insofar as, I mean, you don't get a lot of the Schlagerisms of Absurd, but definitely the rickety, highly punk-influenced quality is
I think the Schlagerisms are in here, too. In some of the things that sound like emo riffs. But anyway, I think it depends band to band, right? Mm-hmm. But definitely we can agree on the sort of punky, stompy format of the music, where it's mostly like 1-2 beats and D beats and like mid-tempo stomp.
Yeah.
So it's this kind of Absurd meets emo meets highly melodic OO's black metal from Finland and stuff like that. And in a way, this is a scene that I've basically just like almost denounced before. Mm-hmm. But
I reflexively kind of want to denounce it myself, but not necessarily because it's bad. But well, I mean, I guess we'll get into it.
But this is a classic thing about me and the death metal guy. Although all our opinions are objectively correct, we are fallible, and we both have a tendency. We're both contrarian assholes. And so when something is popular, I think both of us tend to react sometimes less to the thing itself than to its influence on the scene. Mm-hmm. Both in terms of how people are talking about it and the effect it's having on other bands. So another part of this hyper-melodic turn in modern black metal would be, say, Vothana. Right? Mm-hmm. And we've said many times, Vothana is cool, it's just the knock-on influence they've had. And, you know, when I first heard Rostorchester, it was really from the Terminus Discord. I had no idea about this band before that. And just from the way it was described as basically sounding like emo, and from the little I listened, I was like, yeah, I hate this shit. But listening to this record, I rather like it.
This is a good record. Yeah.
It's not so different from stuff we've covered. This is black metal that has drifted way to the emo side, but it's not so different from things that we've approved of, like A Pregnant Light, for instance, which is really stuff sort of screamo and hardcore bent in a very black metal direction.
Yeah, I would go as far as to say that this is predominantly an emo record.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think it's like... No, I think you just have to say that. And the thing that there are things that it keeps from black metal, which I like. I mean, there's a reason I mostly don't listen to emo. And that when I do, it's the stuff that is closer to hardcore or black metal or screamo, where that line is. I mean, essentially what this is screamo. Right?
Yeah.
It's like, it's a reinvention of screamo. If sort of like, if screamo is the punk scene's kind of analog to black metal, which they developed almost at the same time, basically at the same time in parallel, then Rostorchester is like the black metal scene's analog to screamo. There's been some sort of like reflection process. And it turns out that if you combine absurd with sensitive emo guitar, you get sort of European folkish screamo.
Which is cool, and it's executed well here. I would go as far as to say I listen to a fair amount of Rostorchester, primarily because I like emo a lot, but my priors are such that if I don't hear a blast beat every 30 seconds, I start to feel like less of a man. So Rostorchester, neatly bridges that gap for me, and is actually like a pretty regular listening in the car thing. But I do want to, I just feel it necessary to talk about, because I've harped on this general idea before, but here it's particularly obvious. We have covered a fair amount of stuff over the past few years, which is black metal that is more or less influenced by emo and hardcore and post-punk, what have you, all these sorts of more delicate genres. What I've also noticed, though, is... And this
we're going back to the broader... Before we start talking about Rostorchester, we've got to talk about its significance on the scene, basically. I think this is where you're going.
Yes. Yeah. So here's my deal. We've covered a lot of these bands, and a lot of these bands have talked to us. I'm not going to name names and become an asshole, but something that we keep hearing is this sort of like... Oh, yeah, wow, it's interesting you would describe it like that. Yeah, I guess I can kind of see that. I don't really, listen to emo or hardcore, but, it's interesting that you draw those parallels. And here's the deal. You know what? You motherfuckers are either clearly lying, or you are getting these ideas from people who are clearly lying. I don't understand what the semantic game being played here is, because now we've got a lot of people who are listening to records that are ostensibly black metal that are simply like emo or screamo or shoegaze records. Right. What is going on?
It's the denial about it is weird, and I think there might, with Zoomer guys, I think it's possible that, you really could have grown up exclusively on... Another thing I didn't realize is that bands like Rostorchester and Totenwache are way older than I thought. Mm-hmm. They're only having a big impact now, and the impact is great, or a visible impact, but they've been influencing stuff behind the scenes for quite a while, right? The Totenwache record, that Feuerbestattung, is 2012. Mm-hmm. I like that record a lot. I think that's cool. I think that it plausibly is a black metal record.
That's all more black metal, yeah.
The thuggish oi stuff balances out the emo-isms. That's a plausible example of a black metal record that has this inflection. That's very cool. That was fucking 2012. I didn't even hear about it till much later. And maybe, of course, there's always someone who is more tapped into this shit than me, including a lot of our listeners. I understand that for them, maybe it was sooner, but it's only in the last 4 years that we're starting to hear a whole crop of bands that are profoundly influenced by this circle of dudes in Germany. And only recently that everyone on Instagram is posting their new Eisenwinter record with the Nazis on ice skates.
Yeah, yeah.
It's so And they're having more of an impact because the guys in the bands are young and still active, and I think enjoy engaging with it. I mean, these are clearly dudes with a sense of humor.
Yeah, well, something I just noticed that's very kind of telling and funny is that most of the guys who say, these sorts of things, I never considered that, I don't really listen to emo, are younger guys. But here, just on the YouTube rip of this album,
yes, I was going to say.
On Rites of Pestilence, here's the thing. Here, talk about, the duality of man. Rites of Pestilence, in the description of the album says nothing about emo or punk. First comment is from Antimessiah saying, "Glad you guys like the new pop punk sound I've been trying out for this album. I've been listening to a lot of All Time Low lately." Which is just, it's like, I there's something so perfect about it that all the younger guys are sheepish about it, but Antimessiah, who's probably 40, is like, yeah, fucking All Time Low, man.
Yeah. I mean, just also to be clear, Rites of Pestilence is a great channel. And
oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah. And he might be our age, but it is weird. But we gotta disagree sometimes, and I do think it's so weird that he doesn't mention that. It's almost like it would be impolite to mention or something, but yeah, Antimessiah just comes out and says it. I mean, what this has left me with, listening to the Rostorchester and thinking more about the personas of these guys, I like this dude. He's a fucking goon.
Yeah, these guys are just having fun.
He records this highly. I mean, look at the Metal Archives picture, or even it's the same as his YouTube profile pic. He records this sort of extremely cool short hair, tough, sensitive guy, black metal, and he just. And he's dressed like he just walked out of recording Fallen Angel of Doom. Yeah. Right? He looks like he's in Blasphemy or Sarcophago. He's having so much fun. And I think that can kind of get lost in translation when people are hear this, and here we can read some other comments from this video that are typical. Excellent stuff. Love those uplifting and triumphant riffs. Very melodic, too. Oh, no shit. The triumphant riffs are melodic. Shy the Great Worm says, so triumphant. It's, that's the new buzzword here. And I think it basically is, people refer to it almost like a subgenre, triumphant black metal. But, the problem is, people talk about this stuff as if it is down the line black metal or even the epitome of everything it should be. And, we have championed the idea that black metal can become things other than black metal. It can shift in a more sort of solar or diurnal direction. It can do all sorts of things, but we can't pretend that this is the same thing as Slaughter Son or even Corellian Satanist Madness. Mm-hmm. It's just not the same thing. They're doing something different and new. And if you like that, great, but it is it's black metal screamo.
Yeah. It's if you want more like this, other black metal bands are not where to go.
Although, unfortunately, there are plenty now.
But they fucking suck. That's the problem.
Yes. So basically, there is some people have grown up with this stuff, and they take it. There's a lost in translation effect happening, and it's totally possible these days to just have listened to these bands and write a record that you think doesn't sound like emo, but here he is saying he listens to All Time Low, right?
I'm sure Title Fight too.
Yeah. Okay. But so that's probably a band I've heard of from you.
Yeah.
But yeah, so now that we've basically talked about the effect. I think one we can zero in on Rostorchester now. One similar broad thing is people, in addition to the music being this highly eccentric kind of thing, right? Rostorchester, when you look at it conceptually, is not positioning itself as down the line black metal, down the line pagan or NSBM. It's not. This isn't this isn't about Odin smiting stuff with steel shells, right? This is. The lyrical themes on Metal Archives are eccentricism, war, anachronism, nature, steel, rust. Now, these are all things that are in black metal, but it gets weirdly specific, right? Eccentricism, anachronism, steel, rust. There's a concept here. When I heard Rostorchester, I thought, what is this, some fictional place in England? That's what you call, Chester is a place name suffix. It's, maybe you probably knew this, but it's Rostorchester. Mm-hmm. Rostorchestra. And there are these guys who have their own solo projects and other bands getting together to pursue a very specific concept that has something to do with in post-industrial decay, like the sort of the rusting underbelly of industrial Central Europe, right? They're Swiss and Austrian, and also something to do maybe with the decay of the storied past, right? Their imagery is like castles and shit, but it's like fairy tale castles. The Sun and the Moon in Chains, their last one, that title suggests there's some there's yearning and nostalgia about change, in the same way you get with some of the Dutch bands. And yeah, it's a fairy tale castle. The cover to that one looks like an Alcest cover. Mm-hmm. These guys might even like Alcest, and they probably know that guy from shows.
Yeah.
Right? Like, they might have known him when he played in Peste Noire. So this is very deliberately sort of wistful, fairy tale, black metal, or whatever it is, musing on decline, decay, and change, and maybe seeking out a little underbelly of whatever magic or whatever magic or sort of heroism or Germanness lies under it.
Yeah,
right?
no, like lyrically, it is a like sort of perfect fusion of like black metal sort of subject matter, like DSBM subject matter, filtered through a prism of very sort of emo phrasing. You know,
like what?
Just running the fifth track on this record through translation. It's like what kind of a man he may be, who walks pale and pale on the road in the day, and in the moonlight and in every wind that blows from east and west and north and south, whither the poor soul flees. What a barren and alien mind that circles here. What man on God's earth would walk under the stars, dressed all alone in black, as if to a noble dying of all love and modesty. You know, it's both at the same time.
Translate?
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's a lot better than it used to be. Yeah,
translation is good, and also those are great lyrics. The poetic cadence survives the translation, which is like that's tough.
But it's like you can see how it's like it's sort of black metal themes of like destroyed, forgotten nobility, but delivered in the sort of personable, humanistic style of like particularly epic emo lyrics.
Oh, conversational. Yeah, what kind of man is he? And also the conversational style you might get in a 19th century novel or short story. Mm-hmm. If this is like some more black metal-y stuff, I mean, it would be like it's like one of those it's like Sancto's Windswept.
Yeah, I like that comparison.
Right. Windswept is a lot more aggressive, but like the mood is very similar. Like you're walking through the neglected side streets of your rusting, medium-sized European city, and you're sort of you're looking past the clutter and junk in the streets to look up at the the shingled roof of the old house, or the sort of the crumbling stone architecture that's still left up there.
Mm-hmm. And it's deliberately direct and deliberately simple and engaging. So and that sort of relates to bridging this into the actual music. What elevates Rostorchester amongst a lot of the like Zoomer guys like emulating the same thing is that Rostorchester arrives at emo very directly. They clearly listen to emo and appreciate it for its own unique characteristics, not merely the ones that dovetail most neatly with conventional black metal, which at this point, popular melodic black metal has fully internalized the low-hanging fruit of emo. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, but not the scene girls. Right?
Unfortunately.
Right. Yeah.
But like DSBM, as we've established, has internalized all the easy shit that it could grab from emo and post-punk and goth music, etc. And by extension, black metal as a whole has learned a bunch of melodic lessons from emo that are now intractable from black metal, or at least certain styles of black metal. Yeah, you're always going to have Marduk and shit, but the genre as a whole knows how to play with those ideas. So, so now merely having an emo riff in your black metal song doesn't really represent an appreciation of emo, because you can just get there by listening to other black metal. Rostorchester, on the other hand, offers stuff that you can only get if you're listening to emo itself, and folding in some of those more challenging ideas into a black metal context, which means that this is not merely black metal structures with emo arrangements. That's the easy course. Here, more challenging stuff happens. Case in point, Auf immer nimmer wiedersehen. We're going to go about a third of the way into this song and play it out through the end. You're going to hear stuff that is going to sound somewhat similar if you've heard other bands in this style, but especially as we close out the track, we're going to get to much more challenging, more convulsive stuff that's really closer to like early 90s emo, what the kids call scrams nowadays. And it's really neat, and that's the kind of thing you won't hear on an Instagram black metal band. So maybe just listening to that answers a question I have of why a lot of people don't describe this as emo. Maybe because they're pulling from sections of emo that a lot of metalheads aren't even aware are part of the history of that genre.
I think that is very true.
So the way I see it, just listening to that, I'm thinking there's a few different ways you can incorporate emo from, like, least substantive to most. You know, at the top level, you're just pulling from Midwest emo, which drops directly into post-black metal and DSBM, basically unadorned. I love DSBM and Midwest emo, but it's just like, it's a fucking gimme. There's no, like, work involved there. Now, we go into a step down, we get a little more ambitious, and then we get into, like, Page 99 and, like, Japanese Screamo, which already sort of has a black metal quality to it, sort of accidentally, but becomes more challenging and a little bit more dynamic when you start infusing it into black metal proper. Here, Rostorchester is doing something really interesting, where they're sort of reaching towards, like, early DC stuff from around like 1990. Like, you can hear the Moss Icon and Antioch Arrow operating just under the surface. Right. The, like, emotional hardcore stuff. Like, especially that riff that I want to draw attention to, that really bluesy, choppy one, that dun 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 dun. That's a kind of riff that just basically doesn't exist in emo anymore, but was extremely common in those really early emo bands. You know, the part of emo that in some distant way was still interfacing with Motorhead. You know? Well,
oh boy, do I have a sample for you. interfacing with Motorhead, that's true. Yeah, that really is kind of a gossamer atmospheric Motorhead riff.
Yeah, it's got that boogie quality. It's based around a
riff.
Yeah, it's based around a pentatonic phrase, and nobody does fucking pentatonic phrases in emo anymore.
Right, but here it's phrased on the high strings in the way that makes it sound like birdsong, right? Mm-hmm. And it's very pretty. The guitar playing here is, I know that the Midwest emo stuff had that sort of gossamer tinkly sound too, but the guitar playing shows an awareness of the stuff that is coolest about emo guitar and feeds in best to stompy black metal, right? There is, he is really not concerned about nailing every note, and in fact, missing notes is basically part of the style in a way that you might get almost by accident in other bands. But the notes sort of squeal. You'll hear like a harmony where one of the notes is fudged and the other note comes through clear, or where the notes are kind of like crossing each other. I can't tell if he's recorded 2 guitar tracks or he just plays like the guy from fucking Ink and Fire, and there's which must have been influenced by this band.
Yeah, well, I think that it's interesting that on riffs like that, that is completely unmoored from black metal guitar style. It's a lot of the times you get these emo things that are just inserted into pure trem black metal context. Here, he's sticking with the really challenging rhythmic stuff that early emo bands would do. It's like emo, especially early on, and now that it's kind of splintered into math rock and stuff, is surprisingly technical music, and there's a lot of really challenging guitar stuff across this record. He's clearly invested in maintaining the things that make emo itself, rather than merely folding the easiest stuff into black metal, as I said.
What's a band that I was just remembered? I always try to I have, I think, more familiarity with emo than your average black metal person, but it's always been a tangential thing for me. By the time I discovered real screamo and emo, I was getting into other stuff. But one band that was a reference point for me that I really liked was Indian Summer.
Yeah.
Right. That has that that's sort of close to post rock too in some ways, but that's definitely old screamo stuff that has this kind of guitar that goes from glistening to screeching without really changing tone. It's a very expressive style of playing that you get far more in emo, where things aren't being rigidly trim picked.
You cannot disengage from the rhythmic impulses of emo, or you're really losing a big part of the story.
Good point. Okay, so here, let's go. So you said something about emo having something to do with Motorhead. And let's go to... I was just going to sample the first song on the record, but I'll do that later. Here I want to get into, more of that side of things. The emo parallel I want to draw. So we're going to go to Das Lied der Alten Grauen Dürren Seelen. This is... Which track? This is track 5. The tracks move very quickly on this record. They're short songs. Which is something we could talk about in its own right. But so here you can totally hear, if you're listening to this from a black metal context, this is one where you'll be like, oh yeah, this sounds like absurd, right? The sort of the absurd influence that's in the background is really in the foreground here. But it's also just very close to a bunch of the tougher, more hardcore inflected emo stuff.
So einzugehen, das Land des schwarzen Gold, in der Hölle.
dum 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 dum. There's another Motorhead riff, right? Or almost. It's like a new wave of British heavy metal kind of riff. And the kind of metal that you can hear, the metal you hear in licks like that, or even there's more at the end of the second riff. There's two sort of fast punk beat verse riffs. There's more lead riffing at the end of the second one. And this is metal, but it's the sort of metal you hear in screamo songs.
Yeah.
And in emo songs. It's like, I talked about this in the Pregnant Light review. There's a certain kind of really epic new wave of British heavy metal riff that lives in emo, in part because of metalcore and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I think also it was already in some of the oldest emo, which we'll get to. So the combination of this sort of jangling melancholy, but also exuberant, sort of emotionally nuanced, jangly guitar with really driving D beats and some aggression to the guitar playing is really specific to one band that I can think of, which is Leatherface. It's crazy how early this record is from. Mush is 1991. And here you'll hear, I think, a close resemblance to Rostorchester. So that's emo metal, right? That lick at the end.
That's totally awesome. I gotta listen to this whole album. I'm totally unfamiliar with this, but this is just right up my fucking alley.
It's an amazing record. It's really cool. It's in that small category of like stuff like, I don't know, like Planes Mistaken for Stars or A Pregnant Light, right? This is from 1991.
It sounds incredibly ahead of its time. It sounds 10 years early.
Yeah, the level of nuance is nuts. Now, I hear some people in the comments comparing the guitar style to like Husker Du or something. Which,
nah.
Yeah, I don't know. Husker Du isn't cool, and this is cool. They do a cover of The Police at the end. I think some of it's actually, even though, right, this band sounds like they're from New Jersey, but they're inventing it, and they're from, like, the Midlands in the UK, I think, or somewhere in the north. But they sound, they're sort of inventing these fundamental emo guitar techniques. They did a split with hot water music.
Dude, that totally makes sense, because I was thinking when I was listening to it, it's like, oh, I can see how this ends up feeding into, like, the Gainesville scene later.
Okay, so hot water music has a similar guitar style?
Kind of. Hot water music, like is not quite as, like, they're nowhere near as tough. It's definitely, like, more effete, like, college student music. But that's, like, a whole scene out of Gainesville, Florida. That's a style that's, like, I don't know if you would like it, but I like it a lot. A sort of, like, emo meets alt-rock meets, like, brushings of hardcore in fits and starts. But, it's really cool.
I would definitely listen. If I could hear something that had just this kind of, like, driving, moody guitar stuff without the Motorhead-isms, I'd probably still like it, but obviously because of the Motorhead-isms, I love it.
Yeah, you might be into it.
It's and so when people say hear us compare black metal to emo, we don't mean like this sounds like fucking, I don't know, like Paramore. Yeah. Except when it accidentally does.
That usually means something went wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, we tend to mean it sounds something like that, like Leatherface. I mean, it's with this band, it's especially appropriate because Leatherface even kind of accidentally sounds like RAC, right? Although the level of musicianship is considerably higher. But really cool, really ahead of its time. And I think, for specific things to pay attention to, right, people can hear. You have the jangly guitars over the D beats, and you also have that lick at the end. That is, you hear licks like that all over any sort of emo-derived stuff in the U.S. in the early 2000s.
Dude, you'll hear it in, like, U.S. metalcore all the time.
Yeah, fucking, I don't know, Coheed and Cambria, Thrice, any sort of, like, gateway metalcore stuff or whatever had it. Anything that was about, like Brand New, so that shit's all over.
Oh, yeah.
Brand New are good because they tapped into this sort of more brooding, post-punky guitar texture side of emo.
I think Brand New is, Brand New is spiritually like a heavy metal band. Like, metal guys like Brand New, I think.
Yeah. Well, they were classically also the one that always got the pass from hardcore guys. But now all hardcore guys like pop punk. So the West has fallen. Now the
billions
black metal
must
guys
cry.
Yeah, but now the black metal guys like emo too. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what All Time Low sounds like. That might just overtly be pop punk.
Oh, that's a straight up pop punk band. They're just having fun,
Yeah. So anyway, that's my one comparison. Who should go next? We've both got tracks that are a little more black metal. Maybe let's switch to you, and then we'll go back to mine.
I can do that.
All right.
So we've been talking about the emo thing the whole time, but Rostorchester actually makes a pretty compelling argument for why the black metal should be maintained, because I think that's always kind of the question underlying a lot of these bands. As the emo influence increases, what purpose does the black metal hold? Well, I think Rostorchester, at least a few times on this record, has a pretty good argument for it, because I want to play... I'm going to play Gleich den Raben aus dem Herzen der Nacht. It's been so long since I've had to pronounce German properly. So this is a song with a lot of emo riffs on it, but the particular delivery mechanism and the execution of it is something that could only purely come from black metal itself. So I think you could argue that this is probably one of, if not the most black metal tracks on the record.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But you can see how it argues in favor of the continued mix-in of black metal in this style, because this is able to accomplish things that pure emo can't. That sort of alacrity, that sort of downbeat intensity, the particular sort of physical gesture of that main riff with those like aggressive hammering motions. You'll get stuff kind of like that in emo sometimes, but never delivered in that sort of manner. That's a purely metallic thing. And this whole record is, this whole song rather is just extremely exciting, and really the whole record. That is what this is able to pull off. And what's interesting is it doesn't really try to split the difference and go for screamo. There's not a lot of stuff on here that sounds like, Japanese screamo or Page 99 or anything. It's mostly going pretty true to the source, 96 and before emo. And combining that directly with black metal, rather than going with sort of the later incarnations of the genre that are a bit more readily available to combination with metal. Which I think is a really interesting tactic, and I think that it comes across really well here.
Yeah, this was definitely my favorite when I first heard this record. Much darker, much more high tension in those sort of racing riffs in the middle, and then that moment towards the end is huge. That when it sort of slows down and then you get that comes in. That is exactly the same move as finished that Leatherface sample.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, and I love that. I love that upbeat snare intro to it. Oh, it's so good.
You're just like, oh, here we go. It's the epic emo riff. It's the epic emo metal riff. They all also can loop infinitely, which is a cool thing about them. And the specific progression really made me think of one of the definitive early 2000s emo songs, which is the cover of Don Henley's Boys of Summer by the Ataris.
Which fucking rules. Anytime that comes on at the bar or something, I'm fucking there for it.
It is it's an amazing song, and even though it's kind of late in the development of emo or whatever, and it's close to pop punk, blah blah blah, that captures some of that authentic emo energy, as does stuff by a lot of the Jimmy Eat World songs have that energy too.
Yeah,
but in the
Jimmy Eat World is awesome.
It's awesome. In the Atari's Boys of Summer cover, you can hear all the trashiness of Don Henley, right? I mean, the Eagles, goddamn trashiest band in the world. And there's this kind of awesome indulgence to it. A big component of early 2000s emo was hair metal.
And
that's part of where the emo metal thing comes from. Maybe even as far back as Leatherface.
Yeah,
right?
I think something I was thinking of, where the sort of confusion in terms here is that I think a lot of metalheads' understanding of emo is emo as filtered through 2000s metalcore, which is a pretty limited slice of the overall genre. But I definitely see what you mean, that association coming in and becoming predominant.
Yeah, or they think of it as just meaning whatever pussy pop punk thing, right? Or but yeah, it's hair metal was a big part of the emo thing, and hair metal, despite the bad parts of those songs, there were a lot of sick riffs in those that get repurposed. Anyway, back to black metal. This is just the first song off the record. This is really, I can see why everyone, so many people our age and younger really like Antimessiah's guitar work. This song shows you why. This is all of the note choices on this track could be emo, but especially if you changed out the timing on the main riff, it could be an emo riff. But here, I can hear how it really could all just be coming from the most exuberant romantic German black metal, how you can get here from something like Odal. So listen for the big riff with the blast beats. I think we're we're going to start on... we're going to start on this kind of like bouncing punk beat riff, I believe.
No, Dad, it's time for you to listen. I know what you want from me. I know you want me to pick up the family trade. We've been blacksmiths for 8 generations. But there's more to life than swinging the hammer, Dad. And I swear to God, I'm gonna make it out of this quaint 16th century Swiss village, and I'm gonna be something more than that. Because I believe in myself, and if I believe in myself, I know I can do anything! right, everybody, we are back. And you know, it's been a while since we've covered a record like this on the show. One that expresses that, as always, the devil has the fastest motorcycle. This is the debut record by German black metal band Ad Mortem, titled In Honorem Mortis, released on Purity Through Fire, which is sort of like fast becoming a... I guess not fast becoming, is pretty much established as a centerpiece, like, European melodic black metal label.
Yeah.
It's one of those labels where it's like, I tend to like most of the stuff that comes out on it, but I just, like, it doesn't stick in my head. And then, like, I gather up a bunch of release I like, and I realize they were all on Purity Through Fire.
Mavorim is good. It's something, for whatever reason, I've sort of forgot to cover, but I remember liking some of the early Mavorim tracks a lot.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not familiar. I'll have to check that out. But so Ad Mortem is an interesting thing. It is a ton of fun. It is definitely a sort of party black metal thing. Clearly Franco-Finnish in inspiration, but more directly, this seems to announce that this is perhaps the first band that is primarily focused on being influenced by a Terminus favorite, which is Totenwache, a band who released their so far only full-length, I believe the year before the show started, but we ended up reviewing it anyway, just because we love it so much. That's a record that is just constantly on rotation for me, and it's like influenced a bunch of music that I've written since I've heard it. And Ad Mortem seems to be a band that is, like, pretty clearly inspired by them. Is that fair to you to say that? Yeah.
I'm let's see. Oh wait, here. I was on the Mavorim page, not the Ad Mortem page. Mavorim sure is a member with Totenwache, interestingly.
Okay.
No, I'm on, they did a split, but I'm on the Ad Mortem page now. So what's the chronology here?
Well, two of the guys here play in Mavorim live.
There you go. So this is really a clearly defined circle. These guys had Totenwache's demos come out a little earlier, but it's just demos. Yeah, Ad Mortem doesn't have a full length till 2024, so I think it's fair to say they are strongly influenced by Totenwache. And also, like, they're all bros, so they're all listening to the same shit anyway, right?
Mm-hmm.
They all listen to Satanic Warmaster, and they're like, yes, that's the cool part.
Yeah. So I guess for those who haven't heard Totenwache, I mean, describing it's a little tricky because I think that you and I slightly differ on the interpretation, where it's like Totenwache is strongly based on a foundation of Franco-Finnish stylistic tropes. You know, your Satanic Warmaster, your Sargeist, your Goat Moon, Seigneur Volan, assorted other French melodic bands. But the aggregate effect of it, when combined with their own sort of unique, particularly Teutonic interpretations of those riffs, doesn't give me the same feeling as Franco-Finnish black metal. It's certainly very pop-forward melodic black metal that is designed to be listened to at extreme metal parties, basically. Host of Cinders actually said that they describe themselves as party black metal band in a really nice comment he left.
Oh yeah, that guy's a G.
Yeah, those guys were awesome. But yeah, I think that what we can hear between Totenwache, this band, and probably some others, that because if there's two, there's a dozen more waiting in the wings, is at least an inflection, an adjustment to the Franco-Finnish style, presented in this uniquely sort of Teutonic context that I think, if not changes the style, refreshes it considerably, as burnt out as we've become on the core Franco-Finnish style over the past few years.
No, I think I would agree with you about that. Yeah.
Yeah, but what differentiates it is kind of hard to define. Clearly, the primary material that this album is working with has been already established by Sargeist and so many other bands, but there's little quirks of melodic configuration, as well as a more substantial dedication to just more straight up biting second wave stuff that makes this like not quite as glossy and sugary as the most excessive examples of that style. Still has plenty of that, mind you, but I don't know, it comes across as a little bit more well-rounded than a lot of bands trading in that style.
Yes, what I would say is I think you can hear more direct. I think a band like Totenwache or Ad Mortem in some ways sound more like the originals of the Finnish bands than the legions of other Finnish imitators. I mean, a record, for instance, I don't know, the Sargeist record we reviewed, right? I really didn't like that one. That's also a Purity Through Fire band, which is Germans playing Finnish stuff. But it really just sounds like Germans playing Finnish stuff.
Yeah.
So, like, Ad Mortem, I listened to that and enjoyed it, and then threw on Let the Devil In after that. And I'm like, okay, they're really pulling from this pool. And Let the Devil In sounds a lot more satanic than most of the bands that it has influenced.
Yeah.
Right? So some of that gnarlier second wave stuff is still in there, even if it sounds like the sort of grim, stepwise Baroque riffing you get in like Gorgoroth.
Yeah, it can be easy to forget just how proximal Sargeist is to more traditional black metal after the glut of imitators.
Yes, and like I think both of these bands, but there is something they definitely put their own inflection on it. It definitely sounds more German. And in part that is through... I mean, these styles are so knotted at the roots, right? Because at the beginning, right, the Finnish bands were really influenced by Absurd, especially Satanic Warmaster and Goatmoon. You read about what people were saying about Satanic Warmaster back in the day. One of the only reference points they had to describe it was it sounds like Absurd, right? And there's the... Legion Werewolf, which is basically an Absurd tribute. And so Totenwache has that sort of Teutonic stomp in it pretty thoroughly, right? They've also inherited it, though, from other sources, like less fashionable ones, like Moonblood. And there's nuances in the melodies that you would get, maybe... I'm sure these guys also dig Nagelfar and Odal and... and the Von Records bands, all these bands that are pulling off of a more sort of like a more refined romantic style, right? Totenwache has this crazy song on their split with Mavorim that just sounds almost like a different band. It just sounds like a Nagelfar track. It's extremely sophisticated romantic black metal. Saugeron. But like, so yeah, they are adding their own touch to it, and it sounds more. The German stuff always just sounds more militant, basically, right? I mean, Totenwache has a certain sort of stompy, fighty energy, and that you can also hear less so in Ad Mortem. Ad Mortem is more of a Satan band, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, aesthetically, they're more in tune with like sort of Scandinavian imagery, but the Teutonic influence persists dramatically.
I would say Totenwache is the more sophisticated band and is drawing from a wider range of influences. Ad Mortem really fucking sounds like Sargeist, and it sounds like Sargeist that's been like juiced up on Absurd. And some of the more classic Norwegian and Swedish stuff.
Yeah. So, I mean, what you get when you get that melange of influences going is stuff that is, like, immediately recognizable to, your average black metal guy who's been listening to this stuff for a long time, but tends to, in fits and starts, be sort of weirdly sophisticated from a melodic perspective.
Yes.
Just, like... a lot of riffs that are taken directly from the established playbook, but they're either A, really good articulations of those riffs, or B, have just little accidentals in them that suggest a more nuanced perspective on what can be done with this model of riffing. So, as I said, prepare for sophistication. But first, you want to hear something fucking retarded? Let's listen to the first track on this album, man. Von Hohenhimmeln, which is just like, oh man, Talk about an album announcing its intent right out the gate. Oh man, the drummer in one of my bands showed me this album, and from I think the first 10 seconds of that clip I just played, I knew that I wanted to cover it on the show. What a just in-your-face, gloriously dumb, borderline parody of the style riff, just executed with pitch-perfect fucking accuracy. Also, love the major key German Schlagerisms, but delivered within this overtly satanic black metal style. Mm-hmm. It's just pure candy for me. I cackled the first time I listened to it. It's so sublimely ridiculous, and they're having so much fun doing it. I mean, it just, like I said up front, this is a party black metal record through and through. But listening to it executed so well, again, refreshes me and reminds me of why I like this style so much to begin with. It's just a ton of fun.
Yeah, I mean, that part is awesome. Right? I mean, it was a great intro to the record. And you can hear their difference from the classic Finnish bands. I mean, there's way more, instead of a focus on long and flowing riffs, there's a deliberately restricted range of intervals in a lot of Ad Mortem's riffs. Which I don't mean as a bad thing. It sets them apart. They like chord changes. What you hear there is there's a lot of sort of chord, key changes, but whatever the riff is, they're never moving very far. And it means the riffs have a sort of, robust primitivism to them. And it also means that, even if they're playing just the most epic, 1 to minor 6 to flat 7 or whatever kind of shit, which they always are, it sounds more high tension than a lot of the sort of more sinuously flowing riffs that have been that were on the big riffs on the classic Finnish records that have influenced so many other bands.
Yeah, and to your point about Totenwache and guys operating in the style sounding more like the originary Finnish records. Mm-hmm. Something Ad Mortem likes to do that is sort of forgotten in Finnish black metal, or Franco-Finnish nowadays, is just those big blaring power chord riffs that were absolutely a part of something like Impaled Nazarene back in the day, even at their most epic moments, but have sort of fallen out of favor because, like, well, why would we do that when we can do more minor scale runs over, like, a pop-punk chord progression?
Right. Ad Mortem does, I mean, this has a lot of fucking Eaten by Rats riffs.
Yeah, just big fucking stupid riffs.
Yeah. So... big fucking stupid power chord riffs, which is awesome. And what else? I think I was gonna say one way of trying to describe this thing that we're describing is like it's what it is. It's like there's a bunch of shit that Americans and British people and people sort of who are in touch with that wing of culture, right? Maybe they're from other countries, but they're very online or whatever. There's a whole side of things that people are getting from the French and Finnish bands, which leads to this, smoothly flowing, hyper melodic, blah, blah, blah style. And these German bands around, like Ad Mortem and Totenwache, are like, fuck that shit, right? They obviously still love the big riffs and the continuously sort of flowing trem, but it's a very different interpretation of the same influences. It's like they're un-Americanizing it.
Yeah,
right?
this is far more just like aggressive and battering.
There's nothing. It's aggressive and battering throughout. Totenwache has some great power chord bashing riffs too, and they're it's like the style has the Instagram raw black people have claimed sort of Senior Voran and Sargeist and used them to make just sort of effete vampire music, right? And these guys are just classic European metalheads who are writing this music to, smash fucking tankards in front of the stage, right?
There's still a concept of toughness being native to this music that has been stripped away. These guys have beards, and the beards are only on their chins. Yeah. No, I think that's... this is sort of to your point about like things that you like about black metal that are distinct from what I like about it, and it's sort of like gives more credit to your way of seeing things, which is like, I've described myself as a person that does not seek black metal for like heaviness or aggression necessarily. I go to death metal for that, and black metal it's like purely sort of about melodic development for me, but. Especially as we've been covering the show, I have seen the consequences of what happens. the terrible consequences that happen when exactly what I described happens, when all of the sort of like vigorous aggression gets stripped out of it. And it ends up being really fucking boring, no matter how cool the riffs might be in the abstract. And these are guys that understand the crucial role that those feelings have in making black metal that's actually effective.
That's a great point. Yeah, they'll give you the big riffs, but they're also giving you the core, the driving aggression. And really, yeah, the idea of a big riff these days almost just means it has a lot of notes in it, right? In this kind of Americanized version of the style. Right, like the notes are there's more and more notes, and now that like all the people are ripping off Jalal and all that Galal, they're ripping off Argus Lent and GBK. The riffs are getting longer and longer, and these guys are just like, this riff has 5 notes. So here's a track I really liked. I bet you knew I was going to sample this. Yeah, so this is track
because something interesting happens on this record where they come out the gate with that huge retarded Franco-Finnish banger, and you kind of anticipate that that's like what the rest of the album is going to be, which is partially true, but they immediately pull back on the next few tracks into stuff that's a little bit more second wavy and grinding.
So here we go. This is Größer als das Leben.
Losgemacht,
So you don't hear those every day anymore.
No, definitely not.
Yeah, so that was a destruction riff. That is one of the destruction on Infernal Overkill, right? The third German thrash band that people never mention as much. They basically write some of the first second wave black metal songs in 1985, and Death Trap is one of them. And but the record is filled with riffs like this, sort of sinister speed metal riffs. And you hear them all over, not all over, but you hear them on the early Norse second wave stuff too. You hear it on Dark Throne, certainly, like some of the best riffs on Funeral Moon.
Yeah, I was about to say that was something like that. It's got to be off Funeral Moon. I don't know which one exactly it is.
Oh, the title track. And then also Maniac Butcher in Czechia takes it and makes an entire style based on that, basically.
Yeah, Maniac Butcher rules.
Maniac Butcher rules. These guys like Maniac Butcher.
Yeah, cool people do.
Yes, exactly. So you get this sick Maniac Butcher riff, which, as you pointed out, there's also, or we both pointed out, there's also one of these riffs on Sargeist Let the Devil In.
Yeah, the chorus riff on the title track, yeah.
Right, but people who are knocking off that style never pull on shit like that. Mm-hmm. So we get this sick sort of black thrash riff, but before that, the track starts off with some kind of standard, just more grinding Norwegian style riffing. And then you start to get these drone riffs. And then, you're changing the root note. And it's really high tension. It sounds epic, but severe, right? It's a truly grim riff. And it really changes and elevates the mood. And it sounds like Hate Forest. Or like the most scowling Swedish stuff, like Niedergang. And then they crank it up again, and they light it up with this almost major key melody, which is a really Drudger Hate Force thing. I don't know. You can hear that they don't just listen to the usual array of Finnish and French bands, and that they're actively incorporating styles of black metal that have more, sort of more demanding harmonic principles, basically.
Yeah, it seems very deliberate on the part of this band to keep those sort of high contrast, more dour moments in the music. It seems like it was a deliberate framing of the music on the part of the members to consider those as important as the big sugary riffs.
And that stuff separates them from Totenwache. Totenwache has darker riffs, but their darker riffs are in the style of the most sinister, say, French stuff, right? When Totenwache sounds really grim, they often sound like Deathspell Omega or something. Or just the nastiest side of Seigneur Volant or something like that. Or they introduce sort of complex and unusual harmonies into a Sargeist riff. Ad Mortem is really drawing from things outside this tradition to create stuff that is, I don't know, there's sort of stuff more in the pagan tradition of black metal, the most severe pagan BM.
Yeah, and I think that's a kind of an inherently German quality. We've talked on the show about how German black metal has never really had quite as defined a style as a lot of other regional scenes. But I think what we've discovered over the course of doing the show is that it kind of does. It just operates, it's a little subtler, I guess.
They have a way of doing business.
Yeah.
So let's go to, here's another one. So I don't think this is a perfect record. I would say this In Honorem Mortis is a solid record. I do not like it as much as the Totenwache full length, but I think this is a classic example of a solid record, which means you can put it on, you have several tracks back to back, which are bangers and just all great riffs. And then as the record goes on, some of the structures loosen a bit. You end up with some passages that are not so great. But you also still hear there's still stuff that's worth listening for, right? You don't have to turn off the record or anything, and there's still there's still cool stuff on the second half. So without further ado, here's another very strong 2-riff sequence, which kind of maybe almost parallels what they were doing with those kind of Hate Foresty riffs. The second riff in particular is just so fucking sick. It's a strange and very powerful harmony that comes out of nowhere, and yet sounds really natural. So let's rip. Okay, that's a cool sort of evil German laugh, but what the fuck happened there?
I definitely remember listening to it. I didn't remember this moment like in isolation, like for a sample, but yeah, definitely very awkward transition there. We both have ideas of like what happened, so let's go with yours.
Yeah, well, obviously, like the objective way of like just you could hear it, right, listeners? You could hear it. You do these two amazing riffs. The first one is kind of like a Sargeist riff, but it really sounds like Forest or something. It sounds very sort of pagan Slavic. And then you drop into that, again, sort of drone riff, Sturbendrang riff with that wild interval. Really cool shit. Back to the sick sort of Slav Black riff. And then, which for me is just one of those, yeah, give me the fucking dopamine riffs. Like, and then just drop... Key change, go down a whole step, and we're in the first riff like this you ever played on guitar. Mm-hmm. And it sort of breaks the mood. The speed just drops out entirely. We're in stompy territory. And although it's still, I think, kind of minor key, it sounds much brighter, right? It sounds more anthemic now, right? The anthemic oi vibe. And this riff is like I'm not against this riff in particular. There's a version of it, when they play it later on with over blast beats, I'm just like, hell yeah, that's the first riff like that you ever learned to play. Yeah. Right? Like, I wrote a riff like that, I liked it. And there's something there's the cool sort of impaled Nazarene vibe to just playing that riff, especially if you do it in a kind of unhinged way and it's well set up. Right? Mm-hmm. But here, it was not well set up. And, it is a big, just totally breaks the mood. But I guess, like, that my explanation is just, if you listen to the song all the way through, it's kind of a long song, you realize they had some sort of really ambitious structure in mind, And it is an ambitious structure. Like, for a black metal song, this is almost through composed. There's that first section, which is the 6 storming riff sequence, and then in the middle, it's supposed to sort of, you're supposed to go from the sort of wrath and tension into something more, triumphant and exuberant, right? That makes sense. But they do it in this really jarring way. You're in the midsection for a long time of the stompy stuff, and then it gets darker again, but not more sort of like the darker Sargeist stuff. And finally, we get a reprise of the grim stuff at the end of the track. But basically, you move through 3 sections that are different in mood and non-repeating, which for a black metal song is pretty sophisticated, especially in this sort of very direct stuff. But they all sound like drafts for different songs.
Yeah, I think that what happened there is that I think that the third riff was a late insert into the song, because I think it was supposed to directly go into that next Sargeisty riff, but they thought, this is like 3 riffs that are all like pretty similar to each other. Is this going to be boring? I think when you're operating... I've fallen into this trap before where...
Oh, you think they would have gone directly to that Sargeist riff with the laugh that we played at the end?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. I think that was the original intent. But I've fallen into this trap before where when you're playing in this sort of like deliberately restrictive pared down style, you only have a handful of riff archetypes to really play with. And so you end up maybe making decisions that aren't great because you're worried about like everything sounding the same. But that's an unnecessary insecurity because we listen to this style because we want it all to sound the same.
You gotta... Yes.
That's a feature, not a bug. It's okay. But no, I definitely understand the impulse because, like, when you're writing this kind of music, you're so, like, hyper-attuned to every single thing that goes on with it and making sure that these riff transitions are very exact. And at certain points, you sort of feel like you've painted yourself into a corner and you just need, like, a big weird shift to make something happen. But things are already happening. You're playing the big, cool riffs. You can just do that. That's fine.
Yeah, I think that's well said. Also, the other thing about it is it's late in the record, so they think, okay, we have to do something different late in the record. No, just keep playing the big, cool riffs. That's really all we want from you. And now I can hear it, because when that riff, the Sargeist riff comes in, it's another anticlimax, because we're not even getting back to the core of the song. It's like digressing more, and it's kind of a canned Sargeist riff. But if you had that evil cackle and that Sargeist riff cascading off the back of the blast beat section, it would have been sick. The way it was originally written was really good, because that Sargeist riff with the sort of D beat or whatever would release from the extreme tension in the blast.
It's weird. You can hear that bad riff just sort of like getting inserted, just like, fuck, man, I don't know. We'll just go with this one.
They're probably just like, hey, everyone knows paying attention by this point anyway. But you can keep them paying attention by not doing that. It's this is the basic impulse of this record is so commendable and awesome that songwriting flaws like that, those aren't that big a deal at the end, right? It's not what this record is about.
They don't end up really affecting the ultimate letter grade for the record. So one more, Der letzte Fiend. And I think, you know what, I like the riff. I think this is a really good example of a song that trades, again, primarily in Sargeist-style riffs, but has a distinct steely German quality to it that I always find so unique in these kinds of bands, where there's going to be a lot of places where as a riff ends, you can imagine it ending with a sort of fainting vampire turnaround, but Ad Mortem always resists that impulse and delivers something more stern and resolute instead.
The vampire punches you. Yeah, bro, he male gauntleted that bitch straight down the well.